The 1980s weren't just a golden era for animation, they were a battlefield. In the shadows of family-friendly hits, daring filmmakers pushed boundaries into darker, stranger territories. Many of their creations were banned, butchered, or buried. Today, we're digging them up, 15 forbidden animated films from the 80s that defied convention and paid the price. 1. Wicked City, 1987. Picture a midnight skyline that sweats neon, a city where treaties between worlds are written in trembling ink and danger hums like power lines. That's the mood of Wicked City, a moody, hard-boiled slab of 1980s anime that arrived with the cool of a noir and the intensity of a nightmare. The setup is simple: a fragile peace pact, a clandestine escort mission, and an urban labyrinth where reality and illusion bleed together. The execution is anything but simple: stylized choreography, severe shadows, and a synth pulse that feels like a countdown. From the moment it surfaced on home video in the West, Wicked City ran into gatekeepers. Ratings boards bristled at its boundary-pushing content and ruthless violence. Distributors, wary of headlines, trimmed and re-rated versions for certain markets. In some places, it effectively became a behind-the-counter title, available but hardly advertised, its cover art a whispered dare in specialty shops. What we call bans often looked like a patchwork of refusals, edits, and cautious shelf placement that turned discovery into a rite of passage. Culturally, the film helped redraw the map for adult-aimed animation outside Japan. It signaled that animation could inhabit the same smoky alleys as live-action thrillers, detectives, double crosses, late-night moral compromises. Its blend of body horror imagery and jazzy noir tone influenced a generation of artists who wanted their frames to sweat and their stories to breathe. You can feel its fingerprints in later urban dark fantasies that treat the city like a living character, dangerous and seductive. The controversy also taught distributors a lesson about context. Wicked City traveled best when it was framed as genre cinema for adults, not as a cartoon that went too far. Retrospective screenings have leaned into that identity, letting audiences appreciate it as a craft object: razor-edged backgrounds, stark color blocking, and fight scenes that snap like cold steel. The debate that once boxed it in, should animation go this far, ultimately widened the doorway. Wicked City didn't just slip through, it helped kick the door open. 2. Twilight of the Cockroaches, 1987. A quiet apartment, a lost slipper, a world underfoot that refuses to die. Twilight of the Cockroaches is an unusual hybrid: live-action environments, animated roaches with fully realized societies. And it plays like a melancholy parable about coexistence, war, and the human habit of looking away. It's a film that asks for empathy toward the smallest creatures and then dares viewers to sit with that empathy when the spray can appears. That premise alone roused discomfort. In several markets, broadcasters and programmers balked at its tone, neither neat children's fare nor conventional adult drama. While outright official bans were inconsistent, the film met resistance in the form of limited bookings, cautionary ratings, and squeamish distributors worried about complaints. In some regions, it was relegated to festival sidebars or midnight slots. In others, it quietly slipped to tape with minimal promotion, its strange brilliance trapped inside a plain clamshell. What endured was the audacity of the metaphor. By humanizing pests, the film reframed conversations about undesirable populations, territorial conflict, and the ethics of extermination. Critics who championed it noted how the movie weaponizes tenderness. The more vividly it sketches community, songs, rituals, romances, lullabies, the more devastating the inevitable crackdown becomes. Viewers expecting a prank found themselves in a soft-spoken tragedy about power and survival. Stylistically, Twilight of the Cockroaches foreshadowed later experiments with blending animation into live spaces, long before digital compositing made it common. Its tactile look, grubby kitchen light, scuffed floorboards, the cruel geometry of traps, gives the allegory teeth. The controversy around taste and propriety, oddly, functioned as free publicity among adventurous cinephiles. The Roach movie you're not supposed to watch. Over time, that whisper grew into reputation. Today, it stands as a brave, offbeat relic of 1980s animation's wild frontier, where even a cupboard could feel like a battlefield, and a family of roaches could earn your tears. 3. Rock and Rule, 1983. Imagine an abandoned arena lit by flickering marquee bulbs. On stage, a legend chases a forbidden note that could crack the world. Rock and Rule is a Canadian anomaly, part dystopian fable, part concert film fever dream, stitched together from post-punk attitude and Saturday morning muscle memory. It looks like a cartoon, moves like a music video, and carries itself like a cult LP you only discover by flipping to the back bin of a used record store. Its troubles weren't just artistic, they were logistical. Distribution stops and starts, competing cuts for different territories, and a promotional push that never fully materialized left the film drifting. While not banned in a courtroom sense, it was treated cautiously because of its raucous energy, rough-edged humor, and grown-up tone. In the United States, edits softened some of that edge, and the theatrical footprint was so small that it felt practically underground. For years, access depended on off-hour cable airings, limited tapes, and word of mouth. And yet, that scarcity became part of the myth. Fans passed it along like contraband vinyl, praising its hand-inked grit, the way its color palette smolders, and the swagger of its soundtrack. The film's cultural impact blossoms in hindsight. It hinted that North American animation could aim older without sacrificing weirdness or heart. It also showed how music could be a narrative engine in animation, not just accompaniment, but the fuse. Later, cult features with rock backbones owe a quiet debt to this orphaned experiment. The controversy around tone and audience, who is this for, still echoes in conversations about animated features that aren't built for kids. Rock and Rule became a case study in what happens when a film's identity is correct, but its rollout is timid. It doesn't vanish, it ferments. Decades on, restorations and reappraisals let its images breathe. Alleyways like record grooves, neon rain like guitar feedback, and a finale that argues music can save or doom us, depending on who's holding the mic. 4. Angel Cop, 1989. Japan's late 80s bubble economy created gleaming skyscrapers and, in the shadows, a deep unease about corruption and violence. Angel Cop channeled that unease into a 6-episode OVA drenched in gunmetal and rain. It follows a ruthless government agent hunting terrorists in a future Tokyo where law and morality have begun to blur. The pacing is brutal, the violence unflinching, and the politics incendiary. The controversy wasn't slow to arrive. Domestic audiences already found its right-wing overtones provocative. But when it crossed into Western markets in the early 90s, it was the English dub's decision to retain, and sometimes intensify, anti-Semitic conspiracy dialogue from the original that set off alarms. Some distributors, worried about backlash, cut or altered entire lines. Others simply refused to carry it. In certain European countries, importation was restricted under hate speech laws, making it effectively banned. Stylistically, Angel Cop stood out for its hard-edged realism in animation. Bullets punched through walls with splintered wood and trailing smoke. Tokyo's streets glowed in cold neon, amplifying the sense of menace. Its influence on later cyberpunk anime is undeniable. The moral ambiguity, the conspiratorial world-building, the fixation on high-tech weaponry. But it's also a cautionary tale about political subtext. The same elements that give it narrative bite can narrow its reach. Over time, the censorship debate became part of its identity. Collectors sought out uncut VHS editions like Contraband, often comparing edits to reconstruct the full picture. For some, that hunt was part of the appeal. Angel Cop wasn't just an anime, It was a piece of contested media, a glimpse into a darker, less filtered side of 80s animation. 5. Barefoot Gen, 1983. A boy's small hand reaches for rice, then light swallows everything. Barefoot Gen opens with domestic warmth and ends in the unthinkable, the atomic bombing of Hiroshima. Based on Keiji Nakazawa's own experiences as a survivor, this Japanese feature doesn't flinch from depicting human suffering in a way that few animated films, before or since, have dared. That courage is precisely what made it controversial. When shown abroad, Barefoot Gen often met with reluctance from broadcasters and schools. In the US and UK, its unvarnished imagery of burning flesh, desperate thirst, and societal collapse triggered calls for age restrictions. In some countries, it faced quiet blacklisting from mainstream distributors, relegated to educational use with heavy contextual framing, or not imported at all. Japanese nationalist groups also criticized it for damaging the country's image, pushing for limited access. Culturally, it became a touchstone for anti-war activism and a reminder of animation's power as a medium for historical testimony. Critics hailed its emotional honesty and its refusal to sanitize the horrors of nuclear war. Artists cited its simple but searing visual style, clean lines against unbearable scenes, as a masterclass in restraint and impact. The bans and restrictions didn't erase Barefoot Gen. They ensured it lived on in underground screenings, student clubs, and late-night festival slots. For those who saw it young, it was transformative, not just a movie, but a lens on humanity's capacity for destruction and resilience. Today, it stands as both a historical document and a rallying cry against forgetting. 6th Golgo 13, The Professional, 1983. The opening is pure pulp adrenaline, a high-profile assassination from an impossible angle, the camera spinning like a bullet in flight. Golgo 13. The Professional, adapted from the long-running manga, introduced audiences to Duke Togo, a hitman whose stoicism and skill make him almost mythic. The film combines noir-style cool with sudden bursts of stylized, often shocking violence. That combination brought trouble. In some Southeast Asian countries, the depiction of political assassinations and morally ambiguous heroes clashed with censorship board standards. In New Zealand, the film was briefly refused classification for home video, effectively banning it until a later edited release. The inclusion of a controversial computer-animated helicopter sequence, groundbreaking for the time, didn't distract from the fact that Golgo 13 was unapologetically adult in tone. In the West, some TV broadcasts trimmed entire fight scenes, while others softened moments involving torture and civilian casualties. These cuts often disrupted the pacing, but they were deemed necessary for airplay. Among fans, the uncut Japanese version became the holy grail, swapped at conventions and whispered about in anime clubs. Culturally, the film helped cement the image of the cool assassin in anime, a template followed by countless later works. It also demonstrated early adoption of CGI within traditional cell animation, marking a technical milestone. The censorship battles didn't diminish its legend. If anything, they reinforced Duke Togo's mystique. Watching it uncut feels like opening a locked briefcase. Dangerous, stylish, and just a little forbidden. 7. Violence. Jack, Evil Town, 1988. Some anime whisper their darkness. Violence. Jack, Evil Town shouts it from the depths. Adapted from Go Nagai's infamous manga, this OVA unfolds in a post-apocalyptic wasteland where survival is an exercise in brutality. Evil Town, the setting, is a crumbling underground complex where rival factions fight over scraps until the giant, savage figure of Violence Jack appears. This installment was one of the most heavily targeted by censors during the VHS boom. Its raw depictions of gore, cruelty, and human degradation pushed beyond what many 1980s anime had attempted. In Australia, the uncut tape was banned outright under the country's stringent video classification laws. The UK placed it on the video nasties radar, leading to a heavily cut release that stripped away minutes of footage. Even in Japan, its content was considered extreme, limiting its mainstream distribution. The controversy overshadowed its thematic intent, a grim allegory about power vacuum societies where lawlessness corrodes any moral compass. Yet for genre fans, that extremity became the draw. Owning an uncut copy was a badge of underground cred, proof you'd seen something too hot for regular rental shelves. Visually, it's pure late 80s anime excess. Thick lines, hyper-stylized violence, and a world painted in rust and shadow. While critics dismissed it as exploitation, its influence on the more nihilistic strands of anime and manga is visible decades later. Evil Town remains a lightning rod, not for everyone, but unforgettable for those who braved its darkness. 8. The Plague Dogs, 1982. At first glance, its soft watercolor palette and hand-drawn charm could be mistaken for a children's film. Then, the first scene hits. Two dogs, Snitter and Ralph, fleeing a research lab after enduring harrowing experiments. The Plague Dogs, adapted from Richard Adams' novel, is an emotional gauntlet that spares neither its characters nor its audience. While technically British and released in 1982, the film's journey into 1980s home video culture was fraught. In the US, distributors slashed 20 minutes from the original cut, softening its most devastating beats. Several countries' broadcasters refused to air it, citing unsuitable for general audiences warnings. Its bleak tone and implications about government cover-ups unsettled more than just parents. Even animal welfare groups were divided over whether its unflinching imagery helped or hurt their cause. Culturally, it pushed back against the idea that animation had to comfort. Instead, it wielded its artistry like a scalpel, cutting to the heart of questions about ethics, freedom, and the price of survival. Those who encountered it unprepared often described it as the saddest film I've ever seen. Its limited theatrical release and subsequent censorship inadvertently gave it cult status. Today, restored versions allow audiences to see the film's true form, a rare example of animation treating its viewers as adults capable of confronting the unbearable. 9. Devilman, The Birth, 1987. If Violence Jack was Go Nagai's howl into the void, Devilman, The Birth was his operatic descent into it. This OVA serves as an origin story for one of anime's most enduring anti-heroes, Akira Fudo, an unassuming teenager who merges with a powerful demon to battle other demons threatening humanity. The violence here is both mythic and visceral, sprawling monster battles, grotesque transformations, and a level of intensity that left little room for younger viewers. When it reached Western shores, some retailers refused to stock it altogether, wary of complaints over its explicit gore and apocalyptic themes. In certain European territories, local boards denied classification, effectively banning official distribution. Its aesthetic is pure 80s anime power. Bold color blocks, heavy shadows, and creature designs that feel carved from nightmare logic. The controversy only boosted its underground appeal, especially among horror and heavy metal fan circles, where its mix of doom-laden storytelling and brutal visuals resonated deeply. Beyond the shock, The Birth laid thematic groundwork for later dark fantasy anime, exploring the thin line between human and monster and the tragedy of heroism when the cost is your own humanity. It also proved again that Go Nagai's work was almost designed to tangle with censors. Every cut, every refusal of classification only deepened its status as forbidden fruit. 10th Fist of the North Star, 1986. The wasteland stretches to the horizon, littered with the bones of a broken civilization. Into this desolation walks Kenshiro, silent, stoic, and armed with the deadliest martial art in fiction. The Fist of the North Star movie condensed the sprawling saga into a 110-minute onslaught of vengeance, grief, and stylized ultraviolence. Heads explode, bodies shatter, and entire gangs crumble before Kenshiro's precise pressure point strikes. That spectacle was also its undoing in some markets. the graphic depictions of dismemberment and gore drew immediate pushback. In the UK, its VHS release was cut by several minutes to secure a classification. Australia initially refused classification altogether, effectively banning it until an edited version appeared years later. Even in Japan, its violence surprised audiences, especially given its roots in a popular shonen manga aimed at younger readers. Culturally, the film cemented anime's reputation for going further than Western animation dared. Its exaggerated violence became iconic, influencing everything from video games to later hyper-violent anime like Berserk and Gantz. While critics were divided, some calling it mindless brutality, others praising its operatic scale, fans embraced it as a primal, cathartic experience. The censorship battles only amplified its mystique. Uncut copies became prized imports, passed between fans as a kind of dare. You need to see this. For many outside Japan, Fist of the North Star was their first exposure to anime's ability to fuse raw spectacle with apocalyptic melodrama. It left an impact as explosive as its fight scenes. 11. Genma Taisen, Harmageddon, 1983. A psychic teenager, an alien princess, and a cosmic war destined to engulf Earth. Genma Taisen. Harmageddon takes the stakes of science fantasy and cranks them to the edge of annihilation. Directed by Rintaro and based on a manga by Katsuhiro Otomo, the film fused sweeping space opera visuals with philosophical overtones about destiny and human unity. Its controversy was subtler than that of gore-heavy peers. In some countries, its apocalyptic imagery, entire cities leveled, countless civilians perishing, drew scrutiny from broadcasters worried about disturbing content. The film's darker moments, including implications of war crimes and mass destruction, pushed it into age-restricted categories. In a few Middle Eastern countries, its spiritual themes were cited as grounds for banning public screenings. Despite this, Harmageddon found an audience among sci-fi fans who appreciated its ambitious world-building and painterly animation. Its international release was uneven. Some regions received heavily edited versions, cutting character beats and violence to fit television time slots. These alterations often muddled its complex narrative, frustrating fans and making uncut editions more coveted. In retrospect, the film's true influence lies in its visual DNA. The cityscapes, cosmic battles, and psychic duels foreshadowed stylistic elements Otomo would later refine in Akira. For those who sought it out in its original form, Harmageddon was less a disaster epic and more a spiritual warning wrapped in celluloid. 12. Devilman, Demon Bird Serene, 1987. If the birth was the storm gathering, Demon Bird Serene is the hurricane's landfall. Continuing Akira Fudo's descent into demon warfare, this OVA pits him against Serene, a formidable winged demon whose battle with Devilman is as tragic as it is spectacular. The fight sequences are relentless, an unbroken ballet of claws, wings, and psychic rage. Censorship concerns mirrored those of its predecessor: grotesque monster designs, intense violence, and scenes that left little to the imagination of the horror implied. In several European territories, censors demanded frame-by-frame cuts to tone down bloodshed. Some North American retailers refused to stock it altogether, citing parental complaints from earlier Devilman releases. Visually, the OVA is a showcase of late 80s animation excess. Lavish hand-drawn detail, saturated colors, and fight choreography that moves like music. But beneath the spectacle is a surprisingly mournful undercurrent, as Serene's duel with Akira hints at loyalty, pride, and love twisted by the nature of war. The bans and edits only solidified its cult appeal. For horror anime fans, Demon Bird Serene became essential viewing, an unflinching chapter in a saga that thrived on testing the limits of what animated storytelling could portray. Its influence can be felt in later anime that embrace beauty and brutality in equal measure. Here's part 5 of 5. The final 3 entries, each in the 350 to 400 word range, completing the full 4,500 plus word script. Same documentary-style tone, 13 plus language, and focus on controversy, cultural impact, and censorship history. 13. Violence. Jack, Slum King, 1986. If Evil Town was a descent into hell, Slum King is its warlord's coronation. This second violence. Jack Ova paints the post-apocalyptic wasteland with even broader strokes of chaos. Here, the villainous Slum King reigns from a fortress of scavenged steel, ruling through intimidation, brutality, and sheer physical dominance. Into this nightmare trudges Violence Jack, the colossal anti-hero whose arrival promises upheaval. Censorship boards around the world reacted almost identically to Evil Town: alarm, classification refusals, and demands for heavy edits. In Australia, it was refused classification alongside its sibling title. The United Kingdom followed with deep cuts to tone down gore and moments deemed too extreme for public consumption. Even in Japan, this chapter's sheer relentlessness limited its distribution to dedicated fan channels and late-night specialty stores. The film's notoriety spread through word of mouth in anime clubs and tape-trading circles. Uncut editions were treated like artifacts from a forbidden zone, often hand-copied multiple times before reaching Western fans. This underground circulation built its legend as too raw for shelves. Visually, Slum King is emblematic of 80s OVA ambition: bold, fluid animation used not for heroics, but for depicting the ugliness of human collapse. As with much of Go Nagai's work, the point wasn't to revel in destruction, but to force viewers to confront it. Whether one saw it as art, exploitation, or both, Slum King cemented Violence Jack as a series destined to clash with censors in every territory it touched. 14. Urotsuki Doji, Legend of the Overfiend, 1987 to 1989 OVA cycle. Few titles in anime history carry the same aura of notoriety as Legend of the Overfiend. Spread over several episodes released between 1987 and 1989, it fused elaborate demon world mythology with some of the most graphic violence and grotesque imagery ever committed to cell animation. While technically straddling the end of the 80s, its first entries hit during the height of Japan's OVA boom, and the backlash was immediate. In the UK, it became one of the most infamous video nasties, banned outright for years. Australia refused classification, as did several European countries, while edited versions in North America still carried hefty age restrictions. The censorship debates weren't just about gore. Overfiend's blending of cosmic fantasy with extreme imagery pushed it beyond what many considered acceptable in animated form. For moral watchdog groups, it became a symbol of the danger of imported anime, sparking broader crackdowns on Japanese titles in Western markets. And yet, its influence is undeniable. It pioneered a certain epic scale in horror fantasy anime, with elaborate world-building, grand orchestral scores, and animation that shifted from intimate detail to apocalyptic vistas. Within its niche, it's regarded as a technical powerhouse, an example of what OVA budgets and creative freedom could achieve when unconstrained. It remains one of the most talked about anime in censorship history, a title whose name alone still raises eyebrows decades later. 15. Demon City Shinjuku, 1988. Neon, Mist, and Menace. Demon City Shinjuku imagines Tokyo's famous nightlife district transformed into a demon-infested ruin after a catastrophic battle between a hero and a sorcerer. A decade later, a young swordsman is tasked with venturing inside to rescue the president's daughter and confront the evil festering there. While lighter in tone than some of the titles on this list, Demon City Shinjuku still encountered censorship challenges. In certain European markets, scenes of supernatural violence and implied torture were trimmed for TV broadcasts. Some countries rated it strictly for adults, narrowing its distribution to specialty video stores. Its blend of horror and adventure, coupled with Yoshiaki Kawajiri's signature visual style, Dynamic angles, elongated shadows, and vivid color contrasts made it a gateway anime for Western fans in the 90s. Ironically, the very edits meant to make it more accessible sometimes heightened its mystique. Fans who learned of uncut versions sought them out, discovering a slightly darker, more atmospheric cut than they'd first seen. Culturally, it helped cement the association between Shinjuku and gritty urban fantasy in anime. Its pacing, equal parts moody exploration and sudden bursts of action, became a hallmark of late 80s OVA storytelling. Today, it's remembered as one of the more approachable titles among the banned and cut crowd, a demon-haunted postcard from an era when anime was still seen as a dangerous import. Some of these films vanished from shelves, others survived in fragments, whispered about by fans. Together, they tell the story of an era when animation dared to provoke and often got burned for it. Which title shocked you most? Let us know, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more hidden cinema.